On the evening of July 9, 1762, the fate of Russia hung in delicate balance. Peter III, once emperor, now prisoner, was declared dead under mysterious circumstances. A severe attack of hemorrhoidal colic claimed the official report. But few believed it. Whispers spoke of strangulation, of murder, of a man silenced so his wife could reign. Yet, no inquiry followed. No outcry stirred. The empire moved on, not with grief, but with relief. Catherine was now empress. But her ascent to power was only the beginning. Russia did not yet love her. The nobles doubted her. The church watched her warily, and the army, the very sword that carved her path to the throne, demanded reward. So, Catherine set out not merely to rule, but to transform. She began with alliances. The powerful Orloff brothers, who had helped orchestrate the coup, were elevated. Grigory Orloff, her rumored lover, became a favorite of the court. Titles, estates, and positions were doled out with care, binding the elites to her rule. But Catherine knew loyalty bought with gold was fragile. She needed more. She needed legitimacy. And so, she turned to ideas. She cast herself as the heir not just to Peter, but to Peter the Great, a ruler of vision, a modernizer, a westernizer. She summoned the Enlightenment to St. Petersburg. She read Voltaire. She corresponded with Diderot. She quoted Montesquieu. To the philosophes of Europe, she became La Semiramis du Nord, the enlightened Empress of the North. Yet behind this facade of enlightened thought, Catherine remained a woman of ruthless political instinct. In 1767, she convened the Legislative Commission, a gathering of nobles, merchants, peasants, and minorities, to draft a new legal code. She issued the Knackers, a bold document calling for equality before the law, the abolition of torture, and the rule of reason. It was revolutionary. It was visionary. And it was ignored. The commission dissolved in deadlock. The nobles resisted reform. The serfs remained voiceless. The Enlightenment met the Russian reality and faltered. But Catherine learned quickly. If Russia could not be reformed by law, it would be reshaped by power. She expanded education, founding the Smolny Institute, the first school for girls in Russia. She secularized church lands, strengthening the state. She created new provinces, new governors, new lines of authority. And when rebellion came, she met it with fire. In 1773, a storm rose from the east. Yemelyan Pugachev, a former Don Cossack, claimed to be Peter III returned from the grave. He called on the peasants to rise, to burn the manors, to slaughter the lords, to end serfdom forever. Tens of thousands followed him. For 2 years, Russia trembled. But Catherine did not flinch. She dispatched her generals. She sent her cannons. And when Pugachev was captured, he was paraded in chains, executed in public, his rebellion shattered, his body quartered. The message was clear: reform would come from above, or not at all. In the West, Catherine turned to empire. She waged war with the Ottoman Turks, twice, expanding Russian borders to the Black Sea. Crimea was annexed. New ports were founded. The Russian navy grew stronger, prouder, more feared. She called these victories civilization. But they were conquest. In Poland, she played an even more subtle game. She placed a lover, Stanislaw Poniatowski, on the throne, then orchestrated the partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Not once, but 3 times. By the end, Poland was gone from the map, and Russia, richer than ever. Power had become her art. Catherine aged, but her mind never dimmed. She ruled for 34 years, longer than any Russian empress. She built over 100 new towns. She collected over 4,000 paintings. Her Hermitage Museum became a jewel of Europe. Yet, for all her triumphs, she never freed the serfs. She feared another Pugachev. She feared the nobility. And perhaps, deep down, she feared that without the chains of serfdom, the empire she built would crumble. On November 17, 1796, Catherine died of a stroke in the Winter Palace. She left behind no revolution, only an empire, stronger and more absolute than ever. Russia mourned her. Europe remembered her. History judged her. She was a foreigner who became a Russian. A woman who ruled a man's world. An empress of letters and of iron. She was Catherine the Great. Before the crown? Born Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst in 1729, she was not destined for a throne. Yet destiny had other plans. At just 14, she left her homeland to marry the heir to the Russian Empire, Peter III. A journey across nations, a girl stepping into the icy unknown of royal politics. She was baptized into the Russian Orthodox Church, renamed to Katerina, Catherine. And from that moment on, she resolved to become more Russian than the Russians themselves. Her husband, Peter, was no emperor. Obsessed with Prussia, he alienated nobles, clergy, and the army. Meanwhile, Catherine watched and waited. In the shadows, she built alliances. In silence, she gathered support. Then, in July of 1762, she struck. Peter was arrested and forced to abdicate. Catherine, not born of Russian blood, now ruled the vastest empire on earth. She corresponded with the minds of the Enlightenment. Voltaire called her the Star of the North. She dreamed of progress, laws, education, culture, science. Russia would not just be ruled, it would be transformed. Under her reign, new schools emerged, cities modernized, and the arts flourished. The Hermitage Museum, born from her collection, would become a global treasure. But progress had its limits. While nobles gained more power, the serfs, millions, remained shackled in hardship. Through war and diplomacy, Catherine expanded Russia's borders. She secured the Black Sea, partitioned Poland, and pushed the empire further than ever before. Power without a nation's respect is fragile. I must command not only loyalty, but belief in the future I shape. She wrote over 50 volumes of memoirs, letters, and political commentaries. A philosopher in her own right, she saw herself as a guardian of reason, even as she ruled with iron conviction. Not all were pleased. In 1773, Pugachev's rebellion, a peasant uprising, shook the empire. Though crushed, it reminded her, power, even absolute, was never unchallenged. She reigned for 34 years, longer than any female ruler in Russian history. A foreign-born woman, who became mother of the nation. In 1796, Catherine died in her palace, but her legacy lived on. In laws, institutions, and the soul of a nation she reshaped. Catherine the Great. A monarch, a thinker, a force. Proof that greatness is not always inherited. Sometimes, it's carved from courage, vision, and resolve. This is the story of a woman who conquered more than land. She conquered history. She was born a princess, but not of Russia. Yet she rose to rule it, as empress, as reformer, as one of the greatest monarchs the world had ever seen. Her husband, Peter, was no emperor. Obsessed with Prussia, he alienated nobles, clergy, and the army. Meanwhile, Catherine watched and waited. In the shadows, she built alliances. In silence, she gathered support. Then, in July of 1762, she struck. Peter was arrested and forced to abdicate. Catherine, not born of Russian blood, now ruled the vastest empire on earth. Catherine the Great, her name is etched into history. But before she wore the crown, who was she? Born Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst in 1729, a minor German princess, with no promise of power. But fate had plans. At just 14, she left behind her homeland to marry Peter, heir to the Russian Empire. A journey into uncertainty, a girl stepping into the icebound world of Imperial Russia. She converted to Orthodoxy. Sophie became Catherine. And from that moment on, she vowed to be more Russian than the Russians themselves. But all was not well. Peter, her husband, was eccentric, a man-child obsessed with toy soldiers and Prussia. The court laughed behind closed doors. But Catherine, she listened and waited. She built alliances. She won loyalty in silence. Until, in July 1762, she struck. Peter was arrested. Soon after, he was dead. And Catherine, crowned Empress of Russia, a foreign-born woman, now ruled the world's largest empire. She admired the Enlightenment. She corresponded with Voltaire, Diderot, and Montesquieu. She called herself their philosopher queen. Russia, she declared, must be ruled by reason. New schools, libraries, the arts revived. From her own collection, the Hermitage Museum was born. But progress favored the privileged. While nobles flourished, the serfs remained in chains. Through war and diplomacy, Catherine expanded her empire. She secured the Black Sea, partitioned Poland 3 times, and planted the Russian flag deeper into Europe and Asia. Narrator, she defeated the Ottomans, fought the Swedes, and launched expeditions across Siberia and the Caucasus. But she ruled with more than just swords. She rewrote Russia's legal codes, published a new charter for the nobility, structured society into formal classes. Her Knackers, a legal manual, spoke of freedom and fairness. But it was clear, autocracy would not be questioned. Then came the French Revolution. Heads rolled in Paris. Kings fell. And Catherine grew wary of her Enlightenment friends. In 1773, a peasant named Pugachev, claiming to be her dead husband, ignited a massive rebellion. Cities burned. Nobles fled. She crushed it, ruthlessly. But she never forgot the warning, power must never appear weak. She wrote endlessly. Over 50 volumes of thoughts, policy, and letters. A ruler. A writer. A woman consumed by legacy. In 1796, Catherine the Great passed away, alone but undefeated. She reigned for 34 years, outlasting enemies, shaping nations, and leaving behind an empire larger, stronger, and more enlightened than ever before. Catherine the Great. She ruled not by birthright, but by will. She conquered hearts, minds, and history. This is the legacy of a woman who rose beyond borders, beyond doubt, and beyond time itself.